PANAF ECHO, the African perspective.
African geopolitics. NATOWAS is dead. Let us briefly explain why we rebranded ECOWAS into NATOWAS for those that might be shocked by this. In a world where the masks have finally fallen and the post-World War II peace and love bubble has been busted, the critical mass realizes that it's been led on. The conflicts in Ukraine and Palestine have forced people to open their eyes to the fact that only brutal force prevails, as it's always been. Africans that were still unconscious of the fact that they had been pacified and brainwashed to believe that their countries were independent and that demilitarization and democracy are what they need to live in peace are finally hearing the lies for what they were. Most African countries are still under an ever-changing colonial control and are waging a hybrid war to free themselves. In some parts of the continent, the war is invisible, such as in South Africa, Tanzania, Equatorial Guinea, or Rwanda, but the pressure is immense.
You speak to me as if France was still a colonial power, but I do not want to take care of electricity problems in the universities of Burkina Faso. That's his job. That's the job of the president. So on the other hand, I reassure you. Oh, what's this? He's going away. Stay there. Maybe he's off to repair the air conditioning.
In other parts, it is through good old proxy wars and military occupation, using the pretext of insecurity and instability, which they create themselves, to conduct large-scale military operations which have to last as long as possible, so that resources can be extracted. It is for these reasons that we have chosen to single out the real threat to all of Africa's stability: NATO. The West rules over the world through military might, and all their weapons come from NATO, so that is the main threat. It is a war machine that has for mission to create as much chaos as possible around the world, directly or through proxies, to increase weapons sales and secure the supply of critical resources to Western economies. West Africa and the Gulf of Guinea have been controlled by the West uninterruptedly since colonial times. And if one looks at the pictures of the ECOWAS emergency meeting after Niger's popular revolution, it's easy to see why we will now refer to ECOWAS as NATOWAS. Luckily, there are recent events that substantiate our point of view. There was the African neo-colonial tour of U.S. Secretary Head of State Anthony Blinken. Here is what he said to the Cape Verdean leader during his first stop. As President Biden has said, "We are all in when it comes to Africa. We see Africa as an essential, critical, central part of our future. When an imperialist force is letting you know they're all in and for the long run, it would be wise to listen closely." Interestingly, this tour was scheduled to begin shortly after it was made public that NATO wanted to increase their military presence in West Africa in order to counter the alliance of the Sahel States, most probably to ensure the colonies of NATOWAS comply with the instructions received. On the other hand, there were the revelations of Malian revolutionary leader Assimi Goïta. Could France and the UN be labeled terrorist state and entity? Assimi Goïta reveals how the UN and France help terrorists in the region and makes shocking revelations about Western neo-colonial tactics. Mali already claimed to have gathered substantial evidence proving that France were backing the terrorists, destabilizing the country for over a decade, which we covered in a previous video. Link on screen and in the description.
I spent a year and 4 months on a mission in Sudan and left the country just after its partition into 2 states. Since the announcement that the UN authorized a full deployment of the MINUSMA in Mali, I imagined the Sudanese scenario in our country. Once they're in your country, it will be very difficult for them to leave. Despite France's withdrawal, its presence in Mali persisted through the actions of MINUSMA. It is the great powers that are behind all international missions to ensure their influence and global reach. The decisions made by these great powers often have an impact on other nations, which take them into account for their own military or diplomatic decisions. You witnessed with me that since the announced departure of MINUSMA with the handing over of camps in Mali, we have witnessed sporadic attacks on cities, on the Tombouctou boat, on Bamba and Burum, just to spread fear and doubt among the population. But Malians understood their strategy. They stood behind the authorities. We systematically recovered the camps, city by city, according to the withdrawal schedule. In Argalog, MINUSMA provided equipment to terrorist groups. This transfer was filmed by our drones, and we have the footage. MINUSMA destroyed the entire camp before withdrawing. They followed the same pattern in the camp of Kidal, abandoning the base with our equipment, thus allowing the enemy to take possession. Our goal was clear: to recover the camp of Kidal at all costs. We fought to regain this camp after intense day and night bombings against terrorist armed groups. They fled. Part of what they left behind was 15 MINUSMA armored vehicles in good condition. In Tessalit, they had surrounded the city, and we intercepted their communication indicating not to attack certain individuals considered as allies. The camp was handed over under fire, thinking that we were coming by land. It was our planes that brought our men. Thank God, we succeeded in getting MINUSMA to leave. It didn't meet the expectations of the Malian people.
Now that this has been explained, it should enlighten everyone as to the reasons behind the withdrawal of the countries of the Alliance of the Sahel States, ASS, from NATOWAS. In a short, yet historical, simultaneous broadcast on both Mali and Niger national televisions, Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga, Malian government spokesman and Minister of Territorial Administration, and Colonel Amadou Abdrahman, Niger government spokesman, simultaneously informed the public of the official withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger from NATOWAS. The reasons cited for the withdrawal are the failure of the organization to uphold its founding values and its own rules, the fact that it is under Western influence, its refusal to help the three countries when they were fighting an existential battle against terrorism, its eagerness to impose unlawful and inhumane sanctions on their population, and to threaten the use of force when the three countries were forced to take matters into their own hands. This withdrawal amputates NATOWAS of 55% of its territory, of about 20% of its population, and close to 10% of its GDP. The countries of the ASS are landlocked, which has historically forced them to rely on neighboring countries' ports for access to the sea. Very lucrative deals were signed with these neighboring countries in order to enable them to export the vast amounts of resources they produce each year. They'll now fall back on allies such as Guinea or circumstantial economic partners such as Togo and Morocco. The NATOWAS loses a huge market to export to and all the major land and air transport corridors across the Sahara Desert, creating a logistical nightmare for the parties affected. No one can truly predict how long the organization can survive after this secession. One thing for sure is that the winds of change are blowing and that the Pan-African revolutionary movement, which has resurfaced in the Sahel, is bound to spread. With critical elections taking place over the next 2 years in Ghana, Guinea, Senegal, Togo, and Guinea-Bissau, the geopolitical landscape will surely be intriguing.
Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more echoes of current affairs.